Okay, welcome to a virtual demonstration here of Packback Answers. Packback Answers really came about after speaking with a variety of different professors, and while Packback is certainly known for our e-textbook rentals, we started looking at what other challenges professors were having in the classroom. So for quite some time, we had kind of this vision of connecting students that used the same textbook across a range of universities and online learning communities. And what we found speaking with professors was that there were actual challenges in the classroom that having an engaged online community could help with. And so generally, we find that professors will spend a lot of time preparing for their course, creating a syllabus, a curriculum. This is multiple hours over the summertime or in the off season, if you will. And then you put this all together, a ton of great information, and then the professor has limited time in the classroom to actually engage their students in an open discussion. This is particularly notable in large lecture hall courses where the student or the professor has, say, 50 to 100 students in a course. It's very tough to find time to even open up for discussion. And then if you do, again, you have 50 to 100 plus students, and even one question, might take a good 10 minutes to allow even a handful of students in the course to have a chance at answering it. And so what we do is enable professors to continue the conversation outside of the classroom with their students. We label each community by the textbook to reinforce that this is subject matter conversation. This is not a portal to go and ask for, what's the homework tonight, or do we have class tomorrow? This is really for open discussion. So without further ado, what I'll do here is dive into one of our communities. I'm going to choose one that was primarily active over the summertime. And so to scroll down here, we have quite a few more today. But going into this intro to environmental engineering and science community here on the main page, and I'm going to dive right in. So when the community opens up, the first thing that we kind of focused on for professors and for students was creating an environment and a user interface that felt a little bit more similar to social media than what students are accustomed to kind of seeing on their learning management systems discussion forums. So students spend 15, 20 hours a week on social media, whereas, if they have, say, a Blackboard discussion forum, that really becomes more of like a homework assignment. Students are going on it if the professor has posted a question and required them to go on it, but it's not really a friendly user environment. It doesn't really have a look and feel that wants them or keeps them wanting to come back. And so when you open up Packback Answers, the first thing we focus on here is, of course, the design of having a simple scroll down, similar to what they can find on Facebook or social media, period. The next thing for a professor's sake is really focusing on the organization. And so we open up here, and instead of a professor having to sift through multiple different discussion threads, creating their own topic as they do during the kind of learning management system forums, we break down the organization to be very simple from the start. And so it breaks down into recently asked questions. This is for the professor who wants to keep kind of a tighter grip on as questions are coming in. Many times this means keeping the community open during office hours to answer questions, or say the teaching assistant can keep the community open during the lecture hall to actually be answering questions as they come in. Most students, they are allowed nowadays a laptop in the classroom, and of course that's on a per case basis. But so this community has been a little bit inactive the last few weeks, but generally this would say 3 hours ago question was asked. These ultimately populate toward most popular questions, and so the most popular questions, this is based on the number of views that a given question received. And so this gives the professor kind of what we consider the pulse of their course. So being able to look at, what really became the hot discussion topics throughout the period of a semester. And on the flip side of that, needing answers shows a professor any question that really was not able to be answered by students, and that gives them an area where maybe they can touch down and actually answer a question themselves, or potentially spend some time in the lecture hall to touch base on a given question if none of the students were able to answer it. So I'll dive into what kind of a good question thread looks like. If I open up here, find a unique example of a growth curve for an organism and summarize it. So here on the actual breakdown of the thread, students are able to give their answer, cite a source. The students actually observing these answers, they can vote that question up or down. Right now, we're kind of on a simple thumbs up, thumbs down system. This will ultimately actually populate the thumbs up high quality questions or answers to the top. And then this report it feature allows for some kind of community-based filtering. So if there's ever a one-word answer or an answer that really doesn't pertain to the question, any student can go here and report the question. Packback also has a team of moderators that are day in and day out kind of sifting through all of this content and looking for easy kind of red flags that we can report and pull out content that really doesn't belong in the community. So we have extensive notes on each professor and kind of how they're conducting their course. We look at the syllabus, and we're kind of keeping track of that to be able to really adhere well to our content moderation. So when a student goes to answer a question, as opposed to just getting kind of a content dump or a text dump, in answering a question here, they can post an image, a video, any link, and so we end up with additional media that can be brought into the conversation. In many cases, a textbook might be the core resource for the course, but what a professor will find is that students are out there using YouTube videos, all kinds of different content that they're finding that's actually relevant. And so, as they kind of type up their answer here, before they actually submit their answer, they'll be cited or prompted to cite their source here, which of course is optional. Not every answer needs a source, but we do find that we get a pretty good amount of students actually citing a source. And so we end up with some pretty robust content here on the different answers. And that's how we really keep a conversation contained into one thread. This, of course, now has the opportunity to live on really throughout an entire semester and not be confined to the 10 to 15 minutes, literally, at the end of a class period when professors are able to dedicate time to open conversation. This really keeps that ongoing and, again, pertinent to the subject matter. And so that's kind of how the conversations look. Now, when we get into examples of professors that have large lecture halls, we're talking 50 to 100. Our largest course right now has over 300 students. It's very tough for that professor to actually keep track of who their top influencers are in a course. Aside from, we'll get professors stating that 5 to 10% of students will actually show up in office hours. About the same percentage are the ones actively raising their hand and engaging in class, even if the professor has that time to dedicate. And so a couple challenges there. It's very tough to actually track who's participating, and therefore it's very tough to grade for participation. When a professor is not able to grade for participation, having some degree of the points for the course actually going toward ongoing discussion, well, there's less incentive for the students to keep up with that discussion, and it doesn't really happen. And so grading for and tracking that participation is another huge pain point for professors. And so we have this top contributors feature here, where a professor can go and this is just kind of the simple scroll down view here. They can go and actually look at who their top contributors in a given course are. And so this report is then actually exported to a clean Excel sheet every Friday. The professor then has a very clean way of actually grading for participation. And so in general, the weekly threshold for students is typically set at you have to answer 2 questions, ask 1 per week. That way we end up having more answers than questions. And the professor, let's say they've got 200 students, they take this simple Excel sheet, they can drop that into their grade, knowing that there is some kind of community-based filtering, we've got moderators behind it. It's at least a quantitative way to see that, okay, you've participated to some level in the community. The alternative to this is many professors have a sign-in sheet to their lecture hall where they're grading per se for participation, but in effect, they're really just taking attendance. I mean, a student can be sleeping in the back of class and get their participation points for that course. And so this makes it a little bit more quantifiable, but then you can actually dive in deeper. At a granular level, this professor is able to see what each individual student has really been partaking in. And so let's say Michelle here is actually going to go into a professor's office hours. That professor has a whole lot of students. This gives them additional data points on actually looking into what Michelle's been up to. And so I can see what we call here the paper trail, labeled as activity here, but I can actually click on any of the discussions that Michelle's been a part of throughout that entire semester. And so if let's say Michelle's getting a C and the professor knows she is typically an A student, you can go through and actually look at what has been the learning process for Michelle? What conversations has she been a part of? And again, these are all generally revolving around concepts pertinent to the text in their actual book. And so it's really cool kind of finding those external activity data points around a given textbook as the connecting vector in the community. And so another cool example we have with the paper trail here is there's a particular professor right now who's focusing his research on what happens throughout the given time in a semester on this paper trail. Are student opinions and perspectives actually evolving throughout the course as he's adding different subject matter? And so there's a lot of different research value as well that goes into having this paper trail. When a student actually answers a question, the question asker can designate one answer is the best answer, so you can also see where Michelle might have been the best answer for any of these different questions. And so that's, again, part of the value for the professor. Now for the student, we have a ranking and a points and badging system. So to add just kind of another degree of fun to the community, students are earning what we call reputation points as they're asking and answering questions. Actually, the full details are here. So there's a variety of ways that the students are earning these points. Simply, logging into the community, they earn a little bit of points there on a kind of daily login basis, and then any thumbs up their answers receive, any questions that they've asked or answered, and then we do have this badging system, which as they earn points, they earn these kind of basic freshman, sophomore, junior badges. But as different kind of activities are taking place, we're able to actually designate some of the more fun, creative badges. So I'm going to click here on a sample profile, of course, Jessica Tenuta from the Packback team, to look at all of the badges that you can earn. She's a sample profile here. So the Free Thinker badge, Bookworm, Top of the Class. This is one student per community has that badge. Great debater, took part in a lot of different question answering and actually potentially multiple times. Know-it-all, question master, and then down to the basic badges. So again, just another way to make it sort of fun, add a degree of competitiveness beyond the cut and dry grades. And then students, they do earn an area of expertise as they get to a certain point level in different communities. And so this gets into where the value lies for individual students across the whole course. So if I'm in a 200 person lecture hall, or let's say I'm in even a 25 person classroom, but there's 4 or 5 different sections of that course, well, I really don't know up to 80, 90, 95% of the peers in my class. And so what we do is we actually add transparency into who the other students are in a given course. And so now if I'm in, say, this 200 person lecture hall and I'm looking for help on a given question, well, I can see that Michelle here is a high-ranking student in the community. She's earned quite a bit of points, and she's been deemed, an expert in the given subject matter. Well, I can direct a question straight to Michelle. What this will do is it'll actually send her an email notification that, hey, Mike asked you this question, but it's not going to be siloed in that email thread. And so any of those questions are still going to go back here and actually live in the main feed. And so you're keeping, basically all of that content archived. And what ends up building over time, and where professors are starting to see where they can have value over a period of multiple semesters is you end up with kind of a repository of the course conversation. And so if I've asked that one question of Michelle, well, now the professor can get involved, the other students can get involved, and we're never losing any of that kind of aggregate learning or knowledge sharing. So over time, if let's say I knew 2 weeks ago we were talking about something with growth curves, but I don't quite remember, or let's say it's another example we use is professors will in many cases answer multiple repetitive questions over email. They give one student an answer over email, and that they've kind of fed that one student the information. Well, there could be 200 other students that didn't benefit from that email response. And so here, if I go to actually type a given terminology into the search bar up here, it'll actually show me if any kind of similar questions have been asked or answered. Right now, this goes throughout all of the communities. And so, again, another way for students, say, studying at midnight to go and see if that professor had answered a question from a student at 2 in the afternoon when they actually had office hours. And just a way for, over time, a professor to spend their actual efforts more efficiently because they can answer a question once, and now it's referenceable in the community. And so that's what sort of brings everything together, starts to build additional value just over time as each community becomes more robust. Ultimately, to be able to connect students across a range of different universities, we create almost a Quora type layer on top of this kind of textbook content, which is the vector of connecting the students. And so that's kind of the basic community. What ties it really all together, and really another differentiator aside from the various features we've gone over from the learning management system forums, is really a good mobile experience. And so, students, they walk out of the classroom, they might have, the subject matter from their course on their mind. A question might pop into their head. Well, now we've got to make a bet that they either make a mental or a physical note to get all the way back to their dorm, open up their laptop, maybe email the professor, maybe sift through the different forums on their learning management system discussion board. But there's a lot of friction in between that, and there's a very poor mobile experience on the learning management system. So to kind of emulate the mobile experience here on Packback, and really part of what differentiates this experience is, as I narrow down the screen here, you can see that the text is actually adapting to the width of my screen. And so it's a browser-based mobile experience. As I get to be right about the width of a cell phone here, you can see it's still just a very simple scroll down, same functionality. And so, what we always say is we make it as easy to ask your entire course a question as it is to text a friend. And so when we can kind of live right there on the mobile phone, it's, again, kind of lubricating that ongoing conversation that students are benefiting from. And so that's pretty much how it works. Again, generally 5 to 10% of a student's grade for the so far 57 professors that we have signed on. 5 to 10% of their grade goes toward participation on the community. So we do have that kind of added incentive to actually take part and communicate. And then the pricing model is students can pay either $10 for standalone access to the community, or they receive access for free with the purchase of an e-textbook on Packback. So they do have a couple different options there. In the scenario where we don't actually have the e-textbook available, if it's, say, a custom edition, or just in kind of the long tail of content that we may not have uploaded yet, students do have, at least for the fall of 2015, a special price of $6. And so we've ended up with a combination of all three of those in the fall 2015 semester. So that's pretty much the summary and the demo of Packback Answers. We also have a handout, the Professor Welcome Manual, that kind of describes all of those features. But that's basically it. Thanks for listening.